Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday, August 14th at 7 p.m. and tonight we have a series of committee meetings. Our first committee is of the whole, and we have a presentation from the director for the Center for Campus and Community Engagement, Mary Nally, who's been to us before in a different role, so it's good to welcome you back. And without further ado, I know you have a PowerPoint with us, and we'll work to have the presentation and then a few minutes of questions following.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello and welcome and good evening to everyone present in the room and watching from home. As President of City Council nicely mentioned, I am the Director of the Center for Campus and Community Engagement at Ohio University, and my name is Mary Nally. Today I'm presenting to you a brief overview of what our office does, our mission, vision, and programs, and our community engagement principles. Next, I'll provide a brief overview of our office's social return on investment model that quantifies the value for our communities, for our university, and for our students, and the impact that our office has. And I will also share information about GivePulse, a platform that is free and online, a public platform that is available at no cost to nonprofit organizations as well as local government entities to share opportunities for events, volunteer, internship, as well as fundraiser and donation drives that may be of interest to folks in the room and watching from home. And finally, I hope to invite any questions that council members may have. So our center, the Center for Campus and Community Engagement, works to connect students, administrators, faculty, and community organizations, both near and far, to create and maintain mutually beneficial academic, research, and co-curricular partnerships that foster resilient communities and help create lifelong engaged citizens. We are working in the research, curricular, and co-curricular spheres at our institution, co-curricular meaning volunteerism and internships, while also supporting civic engagement, nonpartisan voter registration, education, and civil dialogue and discourse. What we do to provide such services is that we provide trainings, tools, and many resources that are relevant to our various constituent groups to help set them up for success. A lot of our work involves deep listening to our community partners and residents in all of our campus communities to best understand how our institution can improve our practices and policies, as well as understanding how we are valued by our stakeholders and how we can effectively convey our value to them. In part of this process, our office has developed 6 principles of community engagement based on the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching's best practices. They essentially hold and maintain the national standard in higher education for our work, and this was further informed by nationally renowned community engaged scholars. So the first is that mutual benefit and reciprocity must be equitable among all partners, meaning that for everyone, they need to walk away tangibly benefiting in some fashion, and that needs to be fair between the university constituents and the community partners. Second is that the community's identified priorities lead the partnership. Ultimately, communities are experts on themselves, and so we want to lean in on their expertise to know where the priorities are and where they would like to begin a partnership. Third is that engagement occurs through an asset-based lens so that we're building on the strengths of our communities as opposed to pointing out their deficits. Engagement also needs to integrate justice and equity concepts so that engagement is going beyond addressing a symptom of a larger issue. This is often where students find greater meaning when they understand how the work that they are doing and contributing actually directly makes meaningful impact long term. The 5th principle is that partnerships are grounded in both commitment and sustainability so that there is an investment of time and energy that creates long-term impacts that the community can then maintain over time. I also share this, that commitment is about communicating what we're able to commit to, as often students have shorter schedules and may have a shorter time span in our communities, which we just need to understand and set the expectations to compensate for that. And finally, engaged scholarship must unite and benefit the academic and public sphere. What we mean by this is that as our university partners are perhaps preparing presentations or writing journal articles and being published, that they are co-designing and co-publishing and co-presenting along with our partners, and that we support retention, promotion, and tenure policies that equitably and equally recognize that community engaged scholarship, service, and teaching are equal to traditional methods. So these are the principles we use for our office and in support of our other units that we partner with across the institution. We recently, in partnership with another unit of our institution, were able to develop a social return on investment model that monetarily quantifies the work that we do. And this is a framework essentially that uses proxies based on evidence-based research and the data provided by our office on the specific programs that we work on to help us understand what the social, environmental, and economic impacts they have in the community. This was done in partnership with the Voinovich School for Public Service and Leadership's C program, which stands for the Social Enterprise Ecosystem. This is funded in a variety of ways, including federal funding. And we worked primarily with Dr. Allison Rickett, who has received the highest level of SROI credentialing than any other resident in the United States, and leads the analytical team and is driving research and services at the forefront of a regional, national, and international mission to address global sustainable development. To our knowledge, Ohio University is the only higher education institution in the United States doing SROI consultation, and our office is the only community engagement higher education office to have received such services. So I want to give thanks to Dr. Allison Rickett, others on the SROI team, including Mandy White, the impact analyst, and student researchers that supported our SROI development, Awasu Anadao and Augustin Getchi. So I have paper documentation of our SROI and a series of infographics that have been provided to the council members present, and I do apologize for the tininess of how this displays on the screen. But this document demonstrates that our office is having significant impact for our students, for our community, and for our institution. Examples of this include that we know that our students create an immense amount of additional capacity to our community partners. And in this, we demonstrated that 810 hours of volunteer work has a value of $20,771. And also our internships that we have community-based internships, and we also manage the community work study internship program for the entire institution that adds an additional $28,000 to our communities. We were also able to identify how alumni of our university that have experienced community engagement give back to nonprofits in our community and in the Appalachian region. They also tend to give back more to their alma mater when having these experiences, as it adds more meaning and positive sense of place to their experiences here with our university. We do believe that this process has helped us understand how to identify and quantify how community engaged students are more likely to benefit from our office. I also wanted to share with you some information about GivePulse, which is a platform that has a mission of supporting higher education institutions that are doing community engagement work. And they do this by providing essentially what is a free public online platform where community partners and governmental agencies can create accounts and then post opportunities, whether that's volunteering, internship opportunities, fundraisers and donation drives, or ticketed events to promote broadly to the community, but that at our university, we can direct those opportunities to our students as well as staff and faculty to best be able to increase the amount of connection that we can have with one another while reducing the administrative burden that we all experience in managing volunteers and in doing outreach to them. So we all know that measurements of our impacts are critical, whether it's for grant reports or for annual reports or for our institution for accreditation purposes and for supporting the educational outcomes and student success. So I do believe that this could be a really useful tool to help build our connections, and that there are a variety of ways that we can collect data from this platform. Of course, hours served is one way to do that, but we can also collect information on value raised, on qualitative or quantitative reflections, if you need juicy quotes for those grant reports, for example, but also other deliverables. So there's a way that, for example, if you have a media intern who's responsible for taking photographs or videos, they can upload that to you through this platform, and that way you make sure that you do get that actual tangible mutual benefit from the partnership with the institution. The other excellent thing that we have found about this platform is that it provides third-party verification. So whether it's for a social work field placement student or for a student who's perhaps completing mandated community service hours, this provides a mechanism that is easy and takes away a lot of the paperwork that we've traditionally used to, again, streamline this and verify that the students are indeed saying what they're doing and what we want and expect them to do. So some partnerships within the city and county government are already using this platform. I will, in the interest of time, just point out the Athens County Soil and Water Conservation District is using this for the upcoming Ohio River Sweep on the Hocking, which is not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday. This is their second year in a row, and we've seen a significant increase in student volunteer participation with this event, and it's also helped build a stronger partnership between our office, the Office of Sustainability, and the Conservation District to support these kinds of large community volunteer events. But many of these other entities are either using this tool to manage volunteers or to have access to the community work-study internship program, which essentially places students who meet certain financial aid qualifications with nonprofit organizations and governmental entities, so they have that professional development experience while also contributing to their local community. So in our office, I did want to point out is using this GivePulse tool to have larger coordinated volunteer opportunities. We're planning to do this annually every October for Make a Difference Month is what I'm calling it. October is when Make a Difference Day, a national service holiday, is happening. So we will be promoting that as an opportunity for anyone who is seeking volunteers to post events on GivePulse that month, and we can then drive students toward those events. We did this past April for Athens Beautification Month / Earth Month, if you will. Some of you may remember Athens Beautification Day that some folks in my office used to coordinate with the city of Athens. We have much more limited capacity now, and there are always issues in hosting just a day, especially in April when April showers may make our smiles turn upside down. So having it over the entire month provides much more opportunity and a lot more flexibility in all of our lives and schedules. So I just wanted to point out that those are some great months to consider hosting or promoting volunteer opportunities, and that we've seen significant support from our partners. Nancy Epling, who's an artist in residence at Passion Work Studio, has been using this tool for over a year now, and it has really helped their administrative streamlining of their interaction with Ohio University students. So I want to thank you for your time, and I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Council members, yes. Council Member Swang.
As a community participant in Beautification Day for many, many, many years, And I know when COVID hit, that kind of threw us in a different direction. We've noticed that the last couple of years, it's been very difficult for community volunteers to do the same amount of work that was done on Beautification Day. And I think the mayor will attest to this. What we did on that Sunday in April for so many years was hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of work to supplement the city staff. And we've seen a great reduction in that, which has further taxed our buildings and grounds people. How can we, if we can't get back to Beautification Day, and I think we can, but if we can't get back to Beautification Day, between now and April, how do we get back to the level of community service that we had for so many years?
Absolutely. So I would invite some strategic meetings to do some planning with the key components of the city that were involved in that before, to explore how we can move back to a similar model with that. I entirely agree. In my past life as Executive Director of Community Food Initiatives, we participated in Athens Beautification Day and had immense benefit to it. At that time, the Campus Involvement Center with Barb Harrison at the helm had an entire team of students, community ambassadors that helped coordinate that, as well as a student organization that helped coordinate that event, and neither of those exist anymore. And so we will have to explore alternative strategies. I will say that this past academic year has been the first that we've seen post-COVID an increased level of comfort and safety in students taking advantage of such opportunities, and a real eagerness to get involved and to understand the Athens community and know how to contribute to it. So I think all of our intentions are in the right place, but that we need to think strategically about how to organize those events to add back to that capacity that the city experienced before.
Yeah, because what that event allowed the city to do, and the university, was to put its best foot forward when 4,000 plus sets of parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever, descended upon Athens for graduation.
Right.
And when we don't have that anymore, sometimes our shoes aren't quite as shiny as they could be and were during those years of community, that one big day.
Yeah, certainly. I'll add, Councilmember Swank, that our office has intention this year to partner heavily with the Office of Sorority and Fraternity Life and the, I know they've been recently renamed, but the Campus Involvement Center, the entity that helps manage and coordinate student organizations, will be working with both of their offices to train up the student leaders of those organizations to make sure they are aware of GivePulse and know how to use it. And that those are also opportunities where there may be an opportunity to explore longer-term partnerships with some of those organizations, as a lot of them identify, an organization or cause that they care about that can be maintained for more than just 1 year. So it's not a flash in the pan gamble, if you will.
So it sounds like now would be a good time to start planning. Any other, yes, Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you. So when you and I talked some time ago now, and I've known Mary for a while, one of the things that we talked about was the opportunity for the community, the city, and your office to try to arrange for projects through university professors that maybe would enhance and add capacity for the city administration options. And I'm wondering if there's been some progress with that or some ideas going forward, or I just want to highlight that as a possibility because that's the best way to get some things done through the university and students coordinating with us. So,
Absolutely. Yes, so there has been some progress with that. I think, again, kind of coming out of COVID and a number, not just the pandemic, but a number of other transitional changes at the institution. I believe the dust has settled on those finally, fingers crossed. that this coming year would be a good opportunity to explore and discuss those more, both for our office as well as the Office of Experiential Learning, where perhaps if the partnership makes more sense, their office is also well equipped to identify faculty who may be of good interest. But project-based learning is certainly within the Venn diagram of community engaged learning and critical service learning as a pedagogy. So I do think there's opportunity there. It's just that with all of the changes at the institution, the timing for outreach to faculty in the past few years has not been quite the right time, in my opinion. But I do think that we're in a much better place moving forward now to identify such projects and to do some matchmaking, which is what our office is intended to do, is to help be that matchmaker, provide the tools, resources for a successful partnership, and then to launch you. So I would love to continue to explore that.
Okay.
And
As-
put some
as-
rubber
I think
to the road for
We're going to
it.
see if anybody,
you.
any other council members have a few brief comments, and then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Councilmember Crowell?
Thank you for being here, Director Nally. I just wanted to point out or comment on two aspects of your presentation. One is the work of Dr. Ricketts. This is tremendous, and this is what we need to be looking at for all sorts of projects and offices at the university. This data-driven analysis, looking at economic, societal, and environmental costs and benefits. It's wonderful. So I'm glad to see that she's applied that to the Center for Campus Community Engagement. And the second piece is the Give Pulse platform. I've had some experience with that, as you know, and it's a robust, wonderful platform. It takes some time to get used to it, and I want to caution city offices or whatever that your office is very good at, you and Courtney Lefevre, at sitting down and helping people understand how to use the platform and get the most out of it. And so people should take advantage of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? We thank you for being here and look forward to more work together.
Likewise.
Appreciate the update. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Our second item for tonight under the Committee of the Whole is the Racial Equity Resolution, which you may remember, council members, that we had worked on a draft and tabled that, and now have had feedback under the direction of Councilmember McCary, who's been involved with the Athens Community Relation Commission, and then also the work with the Athens County Foundation, a group there. And so council members do have a revised draft, and Councilmember McCary, I turn it over to you for any comments and summaries.
Thank you, President Nisley. I am happy to resume the conversation and appreciate council's prioritization of this topic. There has been an overall request to summarize the intended outcomes of passing resolution reaffirming our commitment to racial equity. What does that mean on the heels of, in 2000, having declared racism a public health crisis? And it is my understanding from the conversations council's had, plus those of the Racial Equity Coalition members who provided input and members of the Athens Community Relations Commission, that there are really three main benefits to passing this kind of resolution. The first is in its name, reaffirming our commitment. This is something that we don't want to be seen as just a one time we said this is important. We need to be following up, and we need to be following up in a way that allows all current members of council and the administration to have a voice in it, so that we know that this isn't just something that those past members committed to, but that we are looking back to that and looking at how we've moved forward. Another specific thing that we hope to come from this in response to community feedback is that we don't want this to be seen as lip service, that there's been a desire for action-oriented goals. And what I hope will ultimately come from this resolution will be the inclusion of a goal of establishing either a racial equity plan that has been something that the mayor and I and the DEIA coordinator of the city have been learning about through the National League of Cities Racial Equity and Leadership Coalition or Institute. And I believe that if we are able to either consider that racial equity plan or a larger encompassing diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for the city of Athens, that will allow for folks to expand on the 9 diversity and inclusion related goals of the Athens 2040 comprehensive plan, to look at what we're really trying to do in areas of racial equity, promoting equal opportunities across gender identity, sexuality, and so on and so forth. I will share that the chair of the Athens Community Relations Commission, John Schmeeding, had hoped to be here in person to provide some commentary, but I will just summarize a few specific recommendations that that commission has made. The first being in the first whereas the city of Athens is devoted to cultivating a city that ensures all members of the community are supported. The commission recommends that we refer to devotion to cultivating a community. So community as opposed to the word city. And I will summarize that folks have had a few different suggestions on editing the language around condemning acts of brutality, racial profiling. We already have a revised whereas that begins, whereas the city of Athens condemns acts of discrimination, racial profiling, brutality, and other forms of mistreatment by any city employee. A suggested addition would be, and supports strengthening efforts to promote accountability for all city employees. Finally, I would like to emphasize that many community members have recognized the importance of having input from our law enforcement leadership, and that Chief Magruder has seen a recent draft of this resolution that we're working on, and I'm pleased to say has offered the support of the spirit of the work that we're trying to do. And with that, I will open it up to my colleagues on council to share additional recommendations, questions, and comments.
Councilmember Spielness.
Thank you, Member McCary. I think that those changes sound good, and the changes that have been recommended sound good. I have some mixed feelings about this, in that I'm wondering if, and I'm just opening this up for discussion, but I'm wondering if it would help to not limit it just to race, but we do live in a community where there are people with disabilities, and you sort of alluded to possibly broadening it, people with disabilities, for example, mental health and physical disabilities, which we have resources for in our community and have recognized. We also have an issue with people who have very low income, and so class, and levels of poverty can be a discriminating factor in housing and other situations. So, I will defer to Member McCary about, because you wouldn't have to add very many words to make that a little bit more inclusive. But if that's a problem for some reason, I'm open to hearing about it. So.
Thank you. I would just respond briefly to say I could see this council taking one of two routes. One would be following the recommendation of the National League of Cities, which provided what started off as a template for cities across the nation to reaffirm or initially declare their support for racial equity. That is a national model responding to sort of the national climate. However, there is the second option of either creating a resolution that overall affirms our commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or trying to make this broader. I recognize that Councilmember Swank previously pointed out the opportunity to add to the different demographic identities in the second whereas socioeconomic diversity, and I believe that that is appropriate at minimum to expand that second section to let folks know that we are referring overall to inclusion very broadly. But I would be personally comfortable with us proceeding with a resolution specifically about racial equity, and then perhaps thinking about how we want to go about creating either a larger diversity, equity, and inclusion plan, building on the work of the Athens 2040's diversity and inclusion section.
Councilmember Swank.
When people think about Athens County and the challenges that we face here, the number one thing that people cite is poverty, period. As a former teacher at Athens High School that taught a program for disadvantaged 14 to 15-year-old children, I saw Appalachian poverty for the first time. I grew up in Akron. My dad was a Kroger manager. We were a middle-class family. I played basketball with a lot of kids that lived in the projects. and urban poverty and Appalachian poverty are as different as night and day. And I did not know that until I taught the OWA program at Athens High School, and as part of that program did home visits. So I think to include socioeconomic diversity in this is very, very important. Very, very, very important. Secondly, although, I'm not going to say anything now if we want to stay on this number 2, because I have a comment about the third whereas. But I think, and I agree with Solveig, that we need to include that. We really do. Not that one is more important than the other, but when people think of Athens County, what pops to the top, it's how poor this county is as a whole.
Councilmember Grace.
Thank you, President Isley, and thanks to all who have done the work on this resolution. I would say that we're talking about 2 different things. This is foundationally a resolution reaffirming the city's commitment to fight racism, and adding a lot of different categories in, to my mind, weakens the statement and is a different resolution or a different product. If we want to say that we're opposed to every sort of injustice that there is, or if we want to say we're specifically working to fight systems of poverty, I am all in favor of those statements. But I don't think that if our original objective is to reaffirm our commitment to fighting racism, then that is what this resolution should be about, because we're talking about different issues.
Councilmember Swank.
Then if we are going to do that, and I understand your point, then we eliminate age, religion, ethnicity, citizen status, gender identity, and sexual orientation also. Because none of those have anything to do with race in its purest form as you just laid out.
Councilmember McCary.
Thanks. I just will mention that the second whereas has an important piece to the last portion. Says where folks in all those categories are welcomed and can thrive in an intersectional democracy. So that emphasis on intersectionality is intended to remind us that these other areas of our identity, our age, our religion, intersect with our race. So I would be in favor of adding socioeconomic diversity to that list and leaving the rest of the resolution focused on anti-racism.
Yeah.
Councilmember Spielness.
Yes, I appreciate those comments, and I think that would be a good solution, Member McCary. I think that makes sense and covers, I think, perhaps my main issue. So thank you for that.
Councilmember Swank.
Moving to number 3, whereas the City of Athens acknowledges historical injustices and existing structural racism in the City of Athens, I clearly understand the first part, historical injustices. Just this past year, I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and saw on the wall in their library a residential security map, redlining, as clear as could be, with red being the worst and green being the best, and it hangs there on the wall. What I don't, what I asked Councilmember McCary on the second part, though, acknowledges historical injustices and existing structural racism in the City of Athens. Can you give us some examples of the existing structural racism in the city?
Thank you, Councilmember Swank. I'll reference a specific example raised by the Racial Equity Coalition of Athens County, and they are organized around a lot of research-based areas of racial equity, including how we promote racial equity in the arts and education. And one of the areas where we have the greatest data is how educational achievement and health disparities are impacted by systemic racism. So I believe even in our initial declaration of racism as a public health crisis, we had some data about the health impacts, and we see those trends at the county level as well. I don't know specifically about the city, but education and health would be two areas I would point out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, thanks for the discussion. If I'm understanding correctly, to the second whereas, we're adding the socioeconomic diversity, and in the, is it the next two, excuse me, the second from the last whereas, you had a phrase that condemns acts of discrimination, racial profiling, brutality by any city employee and supports, and then you had a phrase there, supports strengthening?
Efforts to promote accountability for all city employees.
Okay, thank you. So those are the two changes that we're considering at this
Well, there
point.
was a suggestion to change city to community in
And
the first one.
community, correct,
Yeah.
that's right. So that's the third one. 3. Mayor Patterson.
I don't recall whether or not this was included, but it's something that should certainly be examined, and that being that we have a clause in the therefores that basically states that we will reaffirm this resolution, if not annually, every other year when we know that we will have a change in both potentially in city leadership as well as council leadership, city council members. I think that would be important. Therefore, we're creating a document that has sustainability to it, both in recognizing how long it has been established, but looking forward to continue to have council reaffirm our commitment to racial equity, as well as recognizing the systems of racism. I would like to also give another example, Councilmember Swank. I think I really appreciate the question about, systems of racism. When Paul Loeb did the research into where there were deed restrictions or covenants here in the city of Athens, is another example. While we now know that there is a pathway for a property owner who, within one neighborhood here in the city of Athens, to where there is racist language in the covenant of that PUD, that planned unit development, there is a way in which someone can have their title or their deed decoupled from that. It doesn't erase the fact that there's still historical documentation that this particular neighborhood was only limited to white individuals, and that the properties could not be purchased, owned, transferred to any individual of color.
Mayor Patterson, in answer to your previous comment about a mechanism for reporting, we do have in section 3 of the Be It Resolved that the council and the city will work together to develop an appropriate budget and create regular reporting cycles for city council. So I think that suffices for now.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So with these changes, then we'll be ready to look at a draft, the draft of this as it returns to council next Monday night. Can we? Okay.
So one
And
reading?
Councilmember Swank?
One reading, or is it 3?
It's just one.
Okay.
One.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is the NOPEC, the Natural Gas Aggregation Program, and council members may remember that in 2017, we became part of NOPEC, and at the time, our method for doing that was we were authorized through SOPEC, our Southeast Ohio Public Energy. And there has been some correspondence ongoing this summer. It began shortly before the council members went on recess, so that's why it's returning now, to look at having the city become a member directly of NOPEC. And so what council members have is a draft resolution and also a copy of the agreement that exists with NOPEC. And it's up for consideration tonight. What the council members would be doing is authorizing the city to become part of this directly, to become part of NOPEC. The law director and the clerk of council have worked on this and looked at it, and also looked at the timeline, knowing that the General Assembly for NOPEC is working towards a November 14th meeting. And so what we would do is begin discussion tonight, take a look at any questions or comments or further information we need to gather, with the hope of maybe bringing it to a reading by August and being able to move it through without needing to suspend. So with that, I will open it up for any questions or discussion, or if the mayor has any comments about it. Mayor, I know that you were a board member of NOPEC earlier. This designation with the city doing it directly would still entitle us to a board member on that NOPEC organization. Yes, Mayor Patterson.
You're correct, President Nisley. In December of 2022, I relinquished my chair seat with NOPEC because I also serve on SOPEC, the Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council's board. And so I no longer serve in that capacity. I would be welcome to any council member who would like to serve on the NOPEC board. But anyway, it's a whole different topic altogether. But I do want to recognize Law Director Lisa Eliason has worked very closely with the legal team in NOPEC to put the resolution, or the ordinance rather, together for City Council to take up, to where SOPEC is no longer basically the pass-through mechanism for the program, the gas program. We will not be, just so we're clear, the City of Athens is under Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council's, 100% green product electricity aggregation, so that won't change. That has nothing to do with this. This just has to do with the natural gas aggregation that we've been with, as President Isley indicated, since 2017. And some of the advantages with NOPEC gas, just to point out, I know that Councilmember Swank has worked closely with me with the freestanding solar lighting that is through the Energized Communities funding through NOPEC, the solar lit bus shelters that we have in the city, in particular on East State Street. Again, those were also through NOPEC's Energized Communities funding mechanism. So it's been a good relationship with NOPEC. This is just cleaning up things to where we don't have to use Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council as the pass-through for the gas aggregation program.
And we're one of 131 communities, if I read the information correctly, that are affiliated with NOPEC.
We are.
And part of that, and what we are part of, is the Southeast Ohio quadrant with the other counties surrounding us. Questions or comments? Councilmember Swank.
When I first saw this on the agenda, full disclosure, I kind of panicked. And the reason I panicked, and I know I'm talking about perhaps a sacred cow, but SOPEC is costing the citizens of Athens a lot of money. The current rate for SOPEC is 9.85 cents per kilowatt hour. The average electric customer in the state of Ohio uses 10,656 kilowatt hours of electricity in a year. Ohio is one of the few states that allows you to choose the electric company you use. And on the apples to apples comparison today, you can buy electricity for 6.69 cents per kilowatt hour. which is 47.3% less than what we get for SOPEC. That translates into a savings of $337 a year, which is a lot of money. And in a 2-year contract, using Brighton Energy at 6.99, that's $549.85 that the average customer can save. I had the superintendent of schools tell me it's not a good deal. So I went to the NOPEC site and looked at gas. Their gas rates are great. In a year, the difference is only $8. The reason I bring all that up, though, is a clause in this, I think, 60-page document on page 9, and it talks about opting out. It says participating customers who choose to opt out of the natural gas aggregation program after the initial 21-day period, but prior to the next 2-year opt-out opportunity, may face an exit charge. I would be very comfortable with this document if we could get rid of that sentence. I shop every 6 months for my electric rates, and I figure over the last 10 years I've saved thousands of dollars doing that. I'm wondering if part of this thing, and I'm looking at the NOPEC electric rates, they're cheaper than I can buy on the apples to apples, which would save even more money. Now, I know we have a relationship with SOPEC, and it's local and all of that, but when you're talking about the average family over a 2-year period spending $550 more than they need to, that's a lot of money.
Mayor?
I'll defer to Mayor, so.
Okay.
But
Councilmember Swank, one of the things I want to make sure when you were looking at the apples to apples that you were looking at a 100% renewable
Yes, sir.
product.
Yes,
You
sir.
did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I pulled out the 2/10 because, you know, if I could save that much money, I'd gladly write a check to the city if I'm not in that program for the $25 every year, because that's what 2/10 of a penny is on 10,000 kilowatts. Because I don't want the city to lose that money. My 25 isn't going to make a difference, but everybody's 25 makes a difference. But yeah, it is a true apples. I put in there 100% renewable energy, which probably like SOPEC is RECs that are bought from Texas or wherever.
Councilmember Spielness?
Yeah, okay, well, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that with SOPEC, they have an aggregated system so that they buy up for a certain period of time. And so you're guaranteed a particular rate for a particular period of time.
3 years.
Whereas any of these others, they will go up anytime.
No.
That's not my understanding, that they will go up anytime.
This is a 2-year, I've been on this for 10 years. This is a 2-year fixed rate.
Fixed rate.
It's a
And
fixed rate.
they do have that option
Yeah.
on the apples to apples, because I've done the same and searched for the fixed rates.
Yeah, it's fixed rate. And you can go for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. You can go for the monthly fee. You can go for, no, this is gospel.
Okay, good to know.
Councilmember Swain, can you identify which line that is? You said it was page 9 of the contract.
Yes,
I'm looking at
page
it. What-
9.
What item? Number?
Paragraph, well, just right here in the middle, it starts off with eligible customers shall be notified of the natural gas aggregation, and it's the very last sentence of that. So what would you call that, the first paragraph? These are bullet points. The first full paragraph.
That's good. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But their gas rates and their electric rates NOPECs are really good. I'd like to switch over there today if I could.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if none, then we will look to, oh, yes.
Just
Mayor
one
Patterson.
last
Yes.
comment, I mean, about any aggregation. You know, the way in which their purchasing power increases is with increased customer base. And that we are seeing through SOPEC, Sustainable Ohio Public Energy Council, to where several months ago, the city of Dayton became a SOPEC customer, and most recently Cleveland became a SOPEC customer. So when you start to see that exponential growth in customer base. Again, to your point, that it is under a contract for a set number of years for what had been purchased in that agreement. Looking forward in time with the increase in buying power, that can actually drop and potentially substantially based upon the number of customers under any aggregation system. That's the way it works, but just make sure that's clear.
Thank you.
Clear as mud.
All right, this concludes Committee of the Whole. We'll move directly to Transportation Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Reisner and joined by Councilmembers Grace, Zip, and Swank.
Yeah, we get to get rid of some more cars.
Thank you, Madam President. Two items under Transportation Committee. The first is something that's been discussed for almost a year now, I guess. A resolution creating a pedestrian accessibility and bicycle task force for the city of Athens. It's a resolution that we have to bring before committee in order to have a vote on the resolution at our next regular session next week. So to get the ball rolling, I guess I should read the resolution. I hope my eyes hold out. Their allergies seem to be particularly bad today for some reason. Excuse me. A resolution creating a pedestrian accessibility and bicycle task force for the city of Athens. Whereas in 2010, the city council adopted a bicycle and pedestrian plan to provide an environment that makes walking and bicycling a safe and attractive option, and whereas the city's comprehensive plan of 2040, adopted in 2020, states that a guiding principle is that, quote, we will promote multimodal and active transportation solutions that better connect our neighborhoods, our destinations, and each other, unquote, and that based on community input, quote, there was broad support for strengthening the sidewalks and bicycling network and addressing accessibility challenges throughout town, unquote, and whereas Athens City Council Resolution R-14-21, adopted on December 13th, 2021, created an ad hoc pedestrian accessibility committee tasked with identifying pedestrian priorities and strategies to meet the goals set forth in the City 2040 Comprehensive Plan and the 2010 Bicycle Pedestrian Plan, and whereas the Ad hoc Pedestrian Accessibility Committee developed the City of Athens Pedestrian Accessibility Plan that includes 47 recommendations designed to improve pedestrian safety and accessibility, and that the City Council voted to accept on April 17, 2023, and whereas cities that provide safe and enjoyable places to walk and bicycle are more economically productive in that they encourage business activities, attract visitors, and increase property values, and whereas a group tasked with working collaboratively with the city and other complementary groups can better ensure that the pedestrian accessibility plan will be implemented according to the priorities, needs, and wants expressed in the plan and aligned with the city planning documents and priorities. Be it resolved by the Council of the City of Athens, Ohio, Section 1, Athens City Council hereby supports the creation of a pedestrian accessibility and bicycle task force within the City Council Transportation Committee tasked with promoting walking and biking as part of a multimodal transportation system and providing leadership and expertise to City Council and city staff. Section 2, Athens City Council recommends that the task force be comprised of, at a minimum, 5 members to include 2 residents, a member of the city's Commission on Disabilities, an Ohio University student, and a member of City Council, all to be appointed by the Council President. Section 3, objectives of the task force shall include establish task force governance and representation, promote traffic, pedestrian, bicycle, and personal mobility device safely, accessibility, and awareness, work with the city administration to implement recommendations in the pedestrian accessibility plan, promote space, safety, proximity, accessibility, connection, and ease for an optimal transportation infrastructure. Section 4, said task force must coordinate with the Athens City commissions, committees, and departments, including Athens City Commission on Disabilities, Environment and Sustainability Commission, Shade Tree Commission, Engineering and Public Works, Arts, Parks, and Recreation, and other organizations, including the Athens City County Health Department, Age-Friendly Athens County Mobility Manager, Athens Public Transit, Ohio University Transportation Services, and Office of Sustainability. Section 5, City Council recommends that the task force report to City Council annually and submit an annual report of progress on its objectives as outlined above. Section 6, this resolution shall be in full force and effect at the earliest moment prescribed by law upon its passage and approval by the mayor. So that's the entire resolution read. I open it up for discussion within the committee. Member Swine?
A couple things on section 2. I know it's understood, but where it says 2 residents, should we insert the word city residents there as opposed to being open-ended where it could be county or whatever? I know it's assumed that they're going to be city residents.
Some of our commissions actually allow for residents to reside outside the city.
Okay.
So it's something we hadn't discussed.
Well, I'd like to see it say city
would
residents
you?
myself.
Okay.
That's my opinion. And the second thing is down here in section 5, to help the committee, after they've met with all of those other committees, the annual report, so that we're all on the same page and create deadlines, would be nice to maybe designate the month in which they do that, just to get into a pattern of reporting to council.
Sure, and it could take, it could become the month, I don't know if we want to insert the language in it, but one option might be, Chair Reisner, if this is a possibility, the month in which the ordinance becomes finalized.
Oh, yeah. So I think this is a great thing, and sadly, in view of the pedestrian fatality in the northern part of the county a day or two ago, this could not be more timely. And if this task force can do half of the job that the pedestrian committee did, we're going to be a long way ahead of where we are today. So just 2 little minor thoughts, but I think it is very timely.
Others? Member Grace? Member Ziff? Oh, come on, you got to, yeah, I knew it.
Poke me enough, I'll speak up. Thank you, Member Reisner. I was, to go back to what Member Swank was just saying with the residents, I have mixed feelings because we have run into some issues in other committees where we've thought about trying to make it opened to county residents, but then some, in particular the Shade Tree Commission, because that one does have the ability to make decisions potentially affecting things in the city. We wanted to keep it just for people who live in the city. But because I don't see anywhere in here that this is going to necessarily, they can't hold up building planning and the such. We do have a large number of people that live just outside the city who do commute in on bikes and other sort of modes of transportation. So I think it probably, fair to assume that it usually would be members of city residents, but the possibility of someone who lives, like that, that quarter mile outside the road, it is, I know, very frustrating for people to be like, well, how come I ride my bike in the city of Athens all the time, like, why can't I do that?
But let me just point out that all the appointments are by the council president. So the burden falls on the council president to decide who sits and who doesn't. So you could have people coming in from outside the city say, well, I really want to be on this, and the president can say, no. Well, why not? Well, Because I'm the president and I can appoint whoever I want. I mean, it's very open-ended here, so, yeah, go ahead.
The impetus for that comment was comments I've heard from residents where people who live outside the city and make recommendations that cost money or that is being borne by the residents, and the person living outside the city who does not work in the city
Yeah.
doesn't pay any of that. So that's where that came from.
Oh, I understand it, and I sympathize with that. I kind of go along with the classical Greek definition of what a city is, and it's what's contained within the walls. And if you're not in the city, you really don't count,
I'm not going to go that far.
Sorry, everybody in Athens County.
Yeah. Well, don't forget the Greeks invented democracy, I didn't, so.
You could always put this off till January when some other president decides.
I think Councilmember.
Well, that does bring up a good point. Let me just interject this. It just dawned on me that there is no deadline when the committee the members are to be appointed. There's nothing here that says that the president, you, could say, well, I really just don't have the time to appoint anyone right now. I'll just wait until December 31st. Or not. I'm being facetious here, I understand that, but there's no mechanism for appointment. It just says the president will appoint, but it's very open-ended, isn't it? I mean, if I was arguing this before the Supreme Court, I think I'd have a pretty good case here, so.
Especially these days.
Because the next president could say it's not a priority and never appoint anybody.
It could.
And we have a task force on paper, and that's it.
Yeah. So, suggestions? Oh, yes. Member Spilness. Yeah, we can open up now. Yeah, go ahead.
President Isley, it's okay.
No, I'm in charge.
Oh,
not her.
all right. Well, I do defer to her. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank the committee, and of course, that's thanking me too, so that's sort of self-serving, but, the bulk of the work was done by the members that were part of this, and we have a couple of members here. Thank you very much. Rob and Stephanie, want to hold your hand up and say thank you very much? Anyway, Diane Bouvier, who chaired it, is not able to be here tonight, but very hard-working committee, and for that matter, the mayor was part of that as well. So I want to say that first, and how important I believe that this is to pass. I guess I do have a question. I guess I'm asking President Isley about this. Is it really an issue that we don't have? It has to be, somebody has to be approved by X date or something? I mean, is that an issue normally for committees and commissions? Do we need to include that in there, or can
This
we?
is a new committee that doesn't exist.
I know that.
The other ones are existing.
I know that, but did it ever happen before that new committees, we had to insert, everybody must be assigned by,
By a certain date?
I don't
No,
think
I
when
don't
we-
think we've ever been specific on it, and I think you could rest assured that
You'll appoint
there'll
somebody.
be appointments taken care of in a
I'm
timely
counting on you,
fashion.
that's the point here, I'm counting on you.
And somebody
So-
could call it up, in the future if you had, if you'd had need of replacements or things like that, then you can say, somebody's not acting on it. The president isn't acting in a timely fashion.
Okay.
You can make a complaint.
Thank you, Member President. Should we also have, do we need to have some language in here specifying the length of a term of an appointment? 'Cause unless I'm missing it, I don't see anything saying that it's for this many years, like 2 years or 3 years. Is it just a lifetime appointment, or?
Good.
is it an age?
Mr. Mayor, you have a suggestion?
May I?
Yes, go right ahead.
I'm looking through this, and I recognize that once this committee is established and there are members, they will likely start to put together their own bylaws as they move forward. However, to that point, Councilmember Ziff, I would recommend that council insert one additional section in here that does address your question, because President Nisley and I and the law director have been working hard to establish basically something that is uniform across boards and commissions in terms of what the term limits are what the terms are and what the term limits may be. There are some commissions that don't have term limits, and that will likely change in the future as well, unless it's dictated by ORC. The other thing also being a suggestion to where you have 2 members who have a 1-year term, 2 members of a 2-year term, and 1 member who has a 3-year term. Again, that's predicated upon whatever the terms are that council decides to have. That way you've got your members initially staggered, and everyone's not rolling off at the end of any said term limit that you may agree upon. So that's my suggestion to council.
Madam
And
President?
The only thing I would suggest is, number one, this is a task force. So you look at the Transportation Task Force, and it existed for, I don't know, 8, 10 years. And it was just a rolling, I mean, you know, there were some people who served on it, but it was very informal. And to me, a task force implies a little bit less formal structure than a commission. So maybe the law director can provide some assistance as we get towards this to see if it needs to be modified for that date by, you know, the assigned, you know, reporting date, and then also the terms and whether or not there need to be terms or bylaws on this. Because I think we may have brushed against a brief conversation about whether this particular one needed bylaws or not. So they may choose to say, we don't need bylaws, we're going to operate with Robert's Rules of Order. So,
Member Spilnes?
One other point, and that is in response to adding the word city resident. I would rather not, because what if we have somebody who's an expert in something that really could add an important expertise, but happens to live out of the city? I think we should be able to be open to that possibility, perhaps. I don't know. I just don't think it's important to have the city. I think that could restrict us in ways that could be detrimental. So, but I will ask what our members have to say.
Okay, let me wind up with, I knew it, Member Graves. We'll get
I
you.
would just say that sometimes finding individuals to serve on boards, commissions, task force can be difficult. And if the requirements are too limiting, it can mean that the same individuals are asked to serve on all the different boards and commissions. And so I would agree that keeping it open to folks that live outside the city, and many, as has already been discussed, for our commissions and boards do live inside the city. Most of them do, and most of the people who have the interest and willingness to serve do. But sometimes there's a case of someone who would be in the city a lot and has an expertise, as Member Spielness said. And so I think that keeping that open is valuable.
Member Swank?
Would you be comfortable with county resident?
As opposed to
Anywhere. I have a
North America?
I have an expert, we heard that word, I have an expert in San Francisco.
Okay. They can make the trip. Can we put something in, they have to meet in person? They can't do any
Yeah.
Zooms or anything? Okay, please, from the audience. Who are you and where do you live?
Rob Flack, I live on Morris Avenue here in the city of Athens, and yes, I'm a city resident. In the discussions in developing language for this, couple different things. One is, I think that the specification of where the residents reside isn't critical here, because it's up to the discretion of the president of council to appoint the 2 initial residents. And so I think letting her make that decision makes sense here. Likely they'd be city residents, but maybe there's a slight chance she may find the right person that isn't. So I think letting her have that go, let her do that, let her make that decision, her, he or she, they make that decision. The other part is section 3, establish task force governance and representation. The intent with that in the discussions we were having was that that would be where bylaws might be drafted. And I think it makes sense to have bylaws, even if they're not formally required, so we know how we're supposed to operate. And then we provide those back to council as this is how we plan to operate. We would, at that point, likely adjust the membership and have it move to a situation where it's approved or maybe recommended by the group and approved by council, rather than appointed by the president in perpetuum. So the initial appointments would be by the president of council, but then after that, it might move to a situation where council confirms. So those were the discussions we were having with council members and clerk of council and others involved in the discussions, for what it's worth.
Questions to the witness? Well, your points are good. I actually agree with them. The reason I prefer the bylaws, as the mayor was talking about, you never know what the state auditors are going to do when they come in here to do an audit. And I think one thing that people get confused about when they hear the word audit is they think they're looking at the financial records and the books. They're not. They're looking at all the procedures that the city does to see if they meet within their standards, okay? And they set them. And if, for whatever reason, they decide, oh, well, let's see your bylaws for this task force. Well, we don't have any. You don't have any? Oh, dear. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to write you up on that one. So, they've done it in the past, so if you can get ahead of them and be prepared for that, I'd say it's good insurance. Any other comments? No? So for Monday, where are we? Are we going to incorporate some of these suggestions, committee? It's not up to me, it's up to you guys. I know what I like, but no one listens to me.
Well, just a residency thing, that was it.
Yeah, okay. Oh, you again, Member Spielman.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
Well, I have a vested interest. I really care, not vested. I shouldn't say that because that sounds like I should recuse myself, but it's not like that. Anyway, no, I just, I care about this because I was part of this committee, and I think it's fine the way it is. I really do, especially since the president of council has discretion. So I think let's just move on. That's my preference.
Okay. Member Grace?
I would say that adding in the section specifying the length of terms and that you start with, as the mayor indicated, individuals with different length of terms so that then they leave the task force in a staggered way is helpful. Sometimes if people are being asked to serve on a task force, they might want to know how long they're committing to. And so I think it would be helpful to add that language in that specifies the length of terms, whether or not individuals are term limited, because sometimes it can be good to ensure that you're getting new voices on a particular issue, and just how that looks. And there's already something, work in progress to make those uniform for the city commissions, so that language is already written, I believe. So a form of that could be inserted. But that would be my recommendation, just for clarity from the start.
I think that's a good suggestion. Thanks for volunteering.
Oh, I can work with Debbie if needed. I don't know how long, like, I don't think this would be but I think we should perhaps bring Member Spielness in as far as length of terms and if they should be term limited.
Okay. Thanks for volunteering.
It's okay.
Any other points, discussion on this topic? All right, well, we'll move on to the Second item here, vehicle disposal, Athens Police Department. I checked in the packet, I didn't really see anything there about it. Does the administration have information?
This is, as I understand, Richard, it's disposing of a cruiser. It's no longer
Okay.
a serviceable vehicle.
So, internet auction or donation or something? Oh, here's something. Could have done that if you wanted to.
No, couldn't.
Oh, okay, I see it here. Okay. Any discussion on this? Committee, audience?
Is it being replaced? Already has, okay.
Okay, so I'll just read section 2. The above listed vehicles hereby authorized for disposal by donation to other governmental agencies or nonprofit organizations like 501c3, sealed bids, trade-ins, sell for scrap, or by enterprise wholesale auctions or other enterprise outlets. Nothing there? Good. Well, we'll bring it up on next Monday. And that concludes Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Councilmember Reisner. We'll move on to Planning and Development. It's chaired by Councilmember Grace, joined by Councilmembers Crowell, McCary, and Spielness.
Thank you, President Nisley. We have 4 items on our committee agenda for this evening. And the first item is the need for the city to accept a replacement easement being granted through the Ohio Department of Administrative Services. And this is for a section of water line that is located on state-owned property, also known as Ohio University here. And this water line is near the intersection of Richland Avenue and South Schaefer on the west side of Richland, next to Tailgate Park. And all the pages of paperwork are attached are from the state DAS, and this is to ensure that we are able to maintain and take care of the water line on that section of property. Are there any questions? Any need for clarification from administration?
I would only note that Ohio University can't issue utility easements for more than 25 years at a time. So this will be the 3rd time that we've re-upped this easement. This water line's been in the ground for 50 years, and we have no intention of moving it. This is just a normal business for the State Department of Administrative Services every 25 years.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Other members of council? Members of the public? Okay. Moving on, the next item is an item brought to us through the City Planning Commission. And this is regarding a change to Chapter 230313 of our city zoning code. And it is specifically about advertising signs. So it is to address the use of what are called feather flags, feather signs, and in the section of code, first of all, these are temporary, and they are advertising signs, and this says that there would be a maximum number of temporary signs that shall not exceed 2 per property, and that if there are multiple businesses located on one property, then the maximum number of temporary signs is 1 per business, and that in terms of the size of the signs, the maximum total signage area for all temporary signs shall not exceed 50 square feet. So that maximum language is new, as well as the insertion of the term feather flags. It says, special sales and special events, advertising, banner, posters, feather flags, pennants, ribbons, streamers, strings of lights, or other similar devices with or without letters, words, numbers, logos, or graphics for the purpose of advertising or attracting attention to a special sale or to a special event upon the premises may be permitted for a period not to exceed 30 consecutive days, if approved by the zoning inspector. And so just adding feather flags to that language. Are there comments or questions from members of the committee? Yes, Member Crowe.
Thank you, Member Grace. Feather flags, I'm assuming, is a sort of flexible rod in the ground that has some sort of fabric on it that's pretty tall and kind of moves in the wind a little bit, right? This is not a person
Correct.
blown, right?
Yes.
Is that included
And
in this language anywhere?
in the notes from the Planning Commission meeting, Director Riggs stated that inflatable signs are not permitted. And I think that those would fall under the definition of an inflatable sign because they have to have the continual air blowing into them. So this is just, like you said, that like a thin rod with a feather-shaped, long, narrow sign, fabric on it. Yes. Are there other questions or comments from the committee? Yes, Member Spielness.
Well, I thought about that too, and, I saw that they said it was not allowed, but I don't see it in here, so where is it not allowed? Where does it say they're not allowed? Because they are really annoying.
It lists the types that are permitted, and it does state that they have to be approved by the zoning inspector. But I think if we went into listing everything that is not permitted, we're only listing the types that are, I guess. And
Okay.
it was just, Director Riggs specifically said that the inflated signs are not permitted.
Well, if Law Director feels this is adequate for that sort of thing, then I'll go with what she says.
Are there other questions or comments from committee? Other members of council? Yes, Member Swank.
Several. What section of the comprehensive plan references this? That says this recommendation is consistent with the Athens 2040 comprehensive plan. Where in that does this say that? I'm just curious.
I did not look.
Could we get that by when we vote on this? Okay, second thing, you get down here to L1, I guess that's an L, yeah, L1A. For the purpose of advertising or attracting attention to a special sale or to a special event. Define that. I stick a sign in the ground and I can just say, it's a special sale, it's a special event.
Still need a permit.
I'll admit, full disclaimer, I hate these things.
So,
East State Street is trashy enough. And these are lining in front of the old, for those who've been around a long time, where the old Kroger store used to be. And there's no definition of whose sale is what. It's just random stuff, well over 50 feet when you add them all up. And they're there all the time.
so I think that the special sale or special event, that is existing language. And the addition of the maximum number of temporary signs and the inclusion of feather flags in here is the change that the Planning Commission was recommending. And this, especially by having the maximum total signage for all temporary signs, and that they may be permitted for a period not to exceed 30 consecutive days if approved by the zoning inspector. Like, that is existing language, but this sort of update to it hopefully will give a bit more enforcement attention.
If it passes.
Yes.
So
If
who's
it
going to
passes.
monitor this?
Mr. Mayor?
I know who's supposed to monitor it, but in reality, who's going to monitor this?
The code office.
Okay?
These are permitted signs as well, so it'll certainly be on the radar for the code office when it comes to, if they permitted these, they will certainly have eyes on as they're driving around the city. And if they see, I'll give you a prime example right now. And to your comment about not being a fan of these, I concur. I agree. This is a step forward, though, to limiting the
This
the
gives us
number.
control.
It is control.
Okay, good.
The other thing to share is that, I mean, just as an example, I was just driving down East State Street earlier today, and I looked over, and there's 4 of them in a row right there on East State Street. And again, the issue that I see, quite honestly, is, one, it starts to look like anywhere can start looking like you're entering into a circus or something like that. But I think more importantly, it's distracting to drivers as you're having people migrating through the city. But this is, I think this is a step in the right direction, because we don't have anything that references these inexpensive feather flags that are showing up. And again, we'll do some digging in to come up with the exact language within code for the inflatable flappy dude things that are out there. Which, that is truly a distraction, talk about distracted driver. So,
I can get that.
Are there other questions or comments?
I just go on, I mean, these are relatively new, like as far as, and they're creeping up all over the place and you're seeing them. I'd encourage anybody, when you see them go up, if it looks obnoxious, it probably is one that was not permitted. Just like the mayor just told me that he just saw 4 down on East State Street, so I just sent an email to David Riggs, the Senate code officer, down there tomorrow to tell him to take them down. So just like all zoning violations, lots of times people will do something that they don't realize is not permissible by zoning, and then we gotta go tell them. So I do appreciate whenever, whether it be a council member or a citizen, reports a problem. Dead deer in the middle of the street, got it. Feather flag stuck in front of odd lots, got it. And we'll go after it, because we can't see the whole city all the time. So, please report them when you see them.
Thank you. Yes, Member Ziff.
Thank you, Member Grace. Just to sort of go off of what Director Stone was saying, and to plug something that I don't think we really talk about very often, but would this be the sort of thing you could use the Athens City Source app for reporting directly to the code office for any kind of code violations that you may witness, experience, or are worried about?
That is perfect, yes.
There's not a camera
It's up
looking at me
on
right
the
now, or I'd be
screen.
looking at it, pointing at you out there in
Yes,
space.
it is up on the screen.
Oh,
and
nice.
Absolutely. That was my intended message for the end of this discussion as well.
My bad.
You carried it off great. Yes, please use the City Source app. It is a great way to report things like this. But you can also, if you prefer not to use apps, call the City Office of Code Enforcement, and they will take care of it there too. Okay, anything else related to feather flags? Okay, next item on the agenda is a Title 49, a special use of the right-of-way permit. And this one is for the owners of a home on Hooper Street, 39 Hooper Street. And this is for a fence in the right-of-way. It is an existing, they have had multiple of the previous iteration of this Title 49. They were previously called the revocable license, and we have at least 2 previous applications for the revocable license to have the use of the right-of-way for this fence. And as those were good for 10 years, the last one was granted in 2013. So the property owners have requested the new version, which is the Title 49 special right-of-way permit, which, if approved, would be good for 7 years. And it's, again, it's for an existing use at 39 Hooper Street. Are there comments or questions from the committee? Other members of council? Yes, Mr. Ziff.
Thank you, Member Grace. Just, is this another one of those instances where this used to be like an alleyway sort of thing, and now it's just sort of like a strip of land? Like, just looking at it on the map, I used to live at 41 Hooper, and I'm just having trouble picturing it, even looking at a map. I mean, this just looks like someone's backyard.
I have a hard time picturing it from the map as well, but I know that there is some public land at the back of the lot. I mean, it says there's a public alley. Yeah, it says a public alley that goes behind. So it must be across there, but it like backs up to the highway. And so it's not on the Hooper Street side of the property. It's in the back of it.
Just curious.
There's a highway fence right there.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
yes, Member Reisner.
Yeah, this jogged my memory. I remember this exact same discussion 10 years ago, with all the confusion and people trying to figure out where this thing was. And I think eventually what came out of it was, we're not really sure where it is, but it's okay.
Well, I've actually been on this property, this exact property, and I know the fence, but there's certainly not a drivable alley back there. So it is crossing a piece of land owned by the city, but not utilized as a through alley.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this would technically be a paper alley, but I will say I believe the residents are taking the correct steps to make sure that they have the proper permission to keep their fence where it is. Are there other questions or comments? Yes, Member Crowe.
Just to add detail, the application lists to occupy alley as description of requested use. And I believe these are new property owners, so these are not the previous.
It was new property owners 10 years ago
Oh, okay.
in the application for the license transfer, because those, anytime the property owners changed, but at least one of the names on the new application is the same as the one from 10 years ago.
I see the date now of 2013. Thank you.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, our final topic for the committee this evening is another right-of-way use, but this is the city accepting the certificate of registration from a utility company to use the city's right-of-way. And this applicant, Madison Energy Cooperative Association Utility Pipeline LTD, has filed the application with their for a certificate of registration. And this applicant will have a total of 3 miles of utility within public right-of-way. And I do not have any more information than what is on the application, so I don't know where this will be. Do you happen to have that information, Director?
So I can speak to this specifically. So to be clear, certificate of registration is different than a special use of the right-of-way permit.
Right.
Public entities are compelled when a PUCO regulated public utility in the city of, or in the state of Ohio asks for access to rights of way in a particular political subdivision to either grant or not grant access, and you have to have a reason not to grant access. It's got to be a pretty good reason within 60 days of them asking. And so when we rewrote Title 49 as our comprehensive right-of-way plan several years ago to get our arms around this process, we basically treated entities operating a system in the right-of-way, i.e. publicly traded and publicly regulated utilities in the state of Ohio as just that, the people who need a certificate of registration. And so this particular one is a gas line company that operates gas lines. Most of our gas lines in the city are owned and operated by Columbia Gas. This is actually a different company. I think this one has gas lines in the University Estates subdivision. I'd have to go back and check for sure. But this is basically, and then what happens is after you grant the certificate of registration, I believe they already exist and they're there, and this is just us enforcing our ordinance to make them register. But then when they go to do construction, we do a construction permit process under Title 49, a different portion of the code. Hopefully that answered that.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I knew we can't tell them no without, as you said, a very good reason when it's a public utility, but I was curious where they are. So, thank you. Are there other questions?
We also can't compel them to give us citywide maps. When they go to do something, we can compel them to give us a map, but we can't go and just say, hey, give us a map where everything is. It's just, we tried back when we wrote this legislation, and that was one of the trade secrets and such, I think in state law are protected, basically. But anytime they go to do something, we can then ask to see if it conflicts with city-owned utilities, other use of the right-of-way, traveling public, that sort of thing.
Okay. Yes, Member Crowe.
Thank you. Director Stone, you mentioned construction. Do you anticipate construction, or this exists and they're just registering?
I believe, for instance, if this is the entity that I'm thinking of that operates the gas lines in University Estates, there will be an extension of a gas line in University Estates to serve the new subdivision that is getting ready to go in on Homestead Court, the PUD that's going through Planning Commission now, that'll come here before the Planning Commission here soon. And I think perhaps the reason they came forward is because we saw that they intended to go and serve that area, and we said, hey, you're not registered. We said, you need to register, and they said, well, what do we need to do? We said, go ahead and fill this out, and we'll take it to council. So
Thank you.
it also gives us, when they register, it gives us points of contact for when there's emergencies and, when there's problems, and when they have to move because we're doing public construction or something like that, which oftentimes, with AEP, Columbia Gas, and our own utilities, we got those pretty well, that's pretty established. But some of the telecoms, for instance, they change ownership all the time, and having that, that point of contact is super, super helpful.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions from members of the committee? Other members of council? Members of the community? Okay, that concludes this committee meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Grace. We'll move on to the Finance and Personnel Committee, and I will note that council members were informed there is a modification to our agenda tonight to have Mr. Zach Rises return. He spoke with us last week at council meeting, and so he'll be presenting to the Finance and Personnel Committee with Council Member Crowell chairing and Council Members Reisner, Ziff, and Spieldness.
Thank you, President Isley. Do you have a recommended order for Mr. Rises, or?
I would suggest, since he's waited an hour and 40 minutes,
Yeah,
to
that's
let
what I
him
was
go
going to
first.
suggest too. Mr. Rises, would you like to address council?
Well, in that case.
Never mind, he's last.
Yeah. You blow it.
How is everybody?
Good, thank you.
Cold.
I did not bring presentation slides like Mary, but I can just begin with an update if that sounds appropriate. Thank you all, thank you council committee, thank you full council, thank you to the administration for allowing me to present. I know my time limit today. To update you on where we are today from last week, I came to present to you about an opportunity for council to provide some funding to match a development for a grant application through the Ohio Housing Finance Agency that will result in up to 40, I think the number is a little bit TBD, but up to 40, probably about 35 senior housing units in the city. We were able to find and secure property out at the end of Hope Drive, just at the end of East State Street, for those familiar. There is already multifamily zoned development out there owned by the Athens Metropolitan Housing Authority. So it actually works out quite well from a zoning perspective, although that's something that I'll be talking to the administration and the zoning office about, and the Board of Zoning Appeals about. We are now going to discuss what that looks like from a city contribution perspective. I'll answer any questions that you all have. And I'll note that I did send last Friday, apologies again for short notice, a definitions sheet that I think all members of council have. And I'm happy to talk through definitions as there are questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Rises. Do I remember the 25% match? Was that the number that you quoted?
So thank you. It's the request is for $1.25 million of what I would assume is general revenue fund from the city, and then contribution to extend utilities up the end of that road onto the parcel in question. It's surrounded by Ohio. A property that was, I'm not actually sure, acquired through the Ohio clean water designation, something like that. So a lot of the land around it is designated can't be developed, but for nature preserve. But this parcel is owned by a private entity and can be developed, which is why it's able to be purchased for this development use. So that's the request of council. And then I don't have a hard number on this, but essentially the 4% grant round brought through OFA is an award that provides a developer with 4% of the development fee. And then OFA also provides $4.5 million, as I described last week, of what's called bond gap financing, bonds through the state that are paid back by the developer. And then the additional amount that's requested, so it's really, the tax credit subsidy, the bond gap provided by the state, a small amount of subsidy and local match from the city, that's the 1.25, and then the developer puts in whatever it costs to actually build the development. So they get a significantly subsidized deal, but again, as I alluded to last week and as is referenced in the definitions sheet, this is the tool that allows, it's really the only tool in our country that allows for privately subsidized or privately incentivized low-income housing developments. So that was a little bit of a long-winded answer, Councilmember Crowell, but to your question of what is the percentage match, it's a small percent of public money that the city puts in, matched with much larger percentages of both state and private dollars. At the exact amounts, I couldn't tell you, but it's safe to say several, above $10 million of outside investment.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you remind us of the deadlines? I know that there were some, you were back here today because we want to make sure we meet a deadline.
Absolutely. So the pre-application deadline for the 4% bond gap round is August 24th. So the request would be that committee discusses this opportunity today, and then that next week council, and you'll have to make a determination how you structure this, but I assume council would authorize the administration to sign a letter of intent to contribute local funds to the project if awarded. That would be my guess, but again, that's up to council's discretion. So that's all that's needed for the pre-application deadline, and then final applications are due a month from the 24th. So I believe it's September 24th actually is the final application deadline. Hence the need to rezone and get commitment of local money.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee? Yes, Member Spianis.
You mentioned rezoning, but I thought what you said earlier was that it was already zoned for multifamily, so I'm a little confused by that.
Apologies. There's adjacent property that's zoned multifamily. This property is zoned R1. It needs to be zoned, I think R3 is the proper multifamily zoning code. But from a code perspective, I simply was referencing that you're not taking, commercial and trying to make it multifamily residential. It's not a significant, change of intended land use.
But it is more work we have to get into the process.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I will do my best to make that happen.
Other members of the committee, other members of council, Member Swank?
So when we spoke last Wednesday night, you answered, and I gave you more than 15 minutes. Appreciate that. You answered most of the questions, but you just said something today that was very, very interesting. Two questions here. Number one, $1.25 million. Does it have to be cash money? In other words, are there other forms of equity that the city could provide to get to that 1.25?
It's a fantastic question, and the answer is both yes and no. This 1.25 accounts for the fact that we will be asking the Port Authority to do a capital lease, which is a state sales tax abatement that only port authorities are able to carry forth, and that's something that we've done on previous developments and needs to be discussed through the County Economic Development Authority. So that is an additional contribution. It's just not one that council has direct authority over. And then, there are other waiving of fees, waiving of, city taxes through a CRA could be done. But that 1.25 is a hard cash request.
Okay. Second question, you said that council would need to pass an intent statement,
Yep.
which I would assume, and I'll defer to the president of council on this, we could do next Monday by suspending the rules. If we were to do that, the next deadline is another month or whatever down the line, which would allow us to go through a 3-reading process on something formal. If during that 3-reading process on something formal, council decided to change its mind, is the intent thing that we would pass next Monday binding?
I don't know. I think that if council passed an intent or allowed, the administration to make that commitment, then in the event that that the project was awarded funds, which we expect, again, as I discussed, because of the Appalachian
Right.
set-aside nature of these funds, by changing council's mind, I imagine that the deal simply wouldn't proceed, but I hadn't considered what that might look like.
Well, as I said to you Wednesday night, I think this is a great thing, and I'm very much behind it. I was just, if some information were to come forward
Yeah.
that both council and the administration felt, and we really don't want to get into this at this point in time, I just didn't want it to be any legal repercussions for the city that might cost the city money.
Yeah, that's a good point. I can't speak concretely to say about legal repercussions. That's not my area of expertise, but I'd say that it's within council's purview to, decide what they do or do not do with essentially what's a memorandum of understanding or a promise or a sort of situation.
And it makes it much easier to vote in the affirmative the next Monday night.
Yeah, those are good questions, Member Swank, and Law Director Eliza may be able to give us some concrete answers to those. Other members of council? City administration?
I would like to make a comment. Certainly something that's worth looking into with an OFA project, potential project such as this, is to whether we came forward with the letter of intent or whatever, and then to later on rescind that letter of intent, how will that impact us? Because I see that as really no different than us getting a letter of award for, say, an ODOT project here in the city of Athens, and us either not being able to deliver or turning it down, which never bodes well, to where you're put at the bottom of the pile when it comes to future projects, and it just casts a bad light on any municipality to go through the process, even with a letter such as this. So I think we really need to be thoughtful as we move forward. So wonderful question, Councilmember Swank. I also have a question / comment, because if I heard you correctly, Mr. Rises, that it's 1.2 million and utility extension. Can that utility extension be our in-kind, a level of in-kind contribution? Because there's cost behind that too. Approximately could be as much as $200,000 to go to push that forward, which could then reduce our commitment to $1 million. So I'd like to get more intel on that. I'd also, to kind of put in further exclamation point on this, that being that one of the things we recognize in that corridor is the need for an enhanced lift station in that area. I mean, we have complicated infrastructure down there. We really do. Director Stone, when Director Stone was director of EPW, or Engineering and Public Works, EPW, that is understanding the complexity down there and where our sewer runs and so on and so forth. Anyway, all that said, you know, that too could be, if you could find that out for us as to whether any needed improvements with our systems down there, with that could be counted as an in-kind portion of this request.
Yeah, I can explore that, and we can all sit down, you know, the developer from the Kershaw Green project, so we can all sit down, absolutely, and have that discussion.
Capacity
Yeah.
fees is another thing to throw out there,
Yep.
where we could explore, because this will be a housing unit, and where capacity doesn't exist at all.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you have 30-plus units, you know, to where that could be something that we could bring to the table as well, which, for something like this, has a lot of value,
Yep.
and would be significant. But just if you would look into that for us, I think that could help with whatever we're looking at. But I think let's really be smart and mindful as to whether we feel we can go down this road. I support this, quite honestly. I think that this would be a much needed housing element here in the city of Athens.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Rises, and we appreciate the work you did in the last week and your work for Sunday Creek Horizons to bring this forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, President Isley.
Process-wise, because I'm looking at deadlines and knowing next Monday, we typically, you know, we would need to know. So it's, you know, questions in my mind, 1 reading or 3 reading resolution. Do we have a sample of that? Is it a letter? Is this a pre-application? Is it a memorandum or a letter? So any kind of additional information that you can provide would be helpful for us this week. Quite frankly, as Clerk of Council Deborah Walker and the Law Director work to craft something in the next few days.
I think I can get you a sample resolution probably first thing in the morning.
Great.
Could you get that to all members of council?
I will probably get it to President Nisley and to Clerk Walker and ask them to circulate it, if that's okay.
As long as I get a copy. I don't care where it comes from.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Rises. Okay, we have 2 more items on our Finance and Personnel Committee agenda tonight. The first is a request from the Athens County Humane Society. This is an interesting situation in that the Athens County Humane Society is taking on the responsibility for the hiring of a county humane agent. And this service has really been provided by over the last 30, 35 years by the former dog wardens or our Athens County dog shelter employees. But a true humane agent is not just restricted to canines, but is really looking at any situations due from our reports of animal cruelty or neglect, and really helping educate the community about taking care of our furry creatures in terms of education and requirements for food, water, shelter, etc. The Ohio Revised Code, as Executive Director Angela Marks attached to her letter, does stipulate that once approved by the mayor of a municipality, that there is a what is the word, a requirement that a city provide at least $125 per month towards the funding of this humane agent. The plans that the Athens County Humane Society has is actually to have 2 people in this position who will be sharing, working approximately 20 to 25 hours a week. And they will be looking at receiving funding from all villages and municipalities in the county, and they are requesting this $125 minimum a month. Again, this is $1,500 a year for this humane agent. Mayor?
May I make a brief comment? If I heard you correctly, you said that required, were not required. If you read the ORC, it says may. So, again, it's under the recommendation of the mayor, of myself, as to whether we go down this path.
Well, if I may read this, it says, salary of agents upon the approval of the mayor of a municipal corporation of the appointment of an agent under section 1717.06, the revised code, the legislative authority of such municipal corporation shall pay monthly to such agent from the general revenue fund of the municipal corporation the salary that the legislative authority considers just and reasonable. And then they say that the minimum is 125. Mayor?
Right, I mean, I'm looking at that language too. You do have in front of you in your documents, the language of the ORC, which has a shall, or has a may in there. I'm reading this as, if I approve for this to happen, then we shall. We shall pay
Right.
$125 a month. I would say, let's just, what I don't want to have is the city have to sit there and be invoiced every month for something. Instead, it's $1,500. I view this as basically having a humane agent that is on retainer for the city of Athens, to where if we do have issues, which happen on occasion, but don't happen, it doesn't happen as often as other things, such as our wildlife that's in the city, and this does not apply to wildlife. So I think that this is the right thing for us to do, to where we have a humane agent. I'd like to get a better definition as to what that humane agent is, but to work with this at that amount, I mean, we're talking a pretty, small amount.
I agree with you. To get down to it, you approve this. Okay. Questions from the committee on the Humane Society's request for a humane agent? Member Spianis?
I guess I was curious as to why this came up now. I mean, what changed or what happened that we need this person now?
That first paragraph.
Yeah, but is there a bigger problem? Has it gotten more severe or something that we, and I don't know, I didn't feel that this was a particularly good answer as to why we need to do this.
Well, just for the public and to answer what Member Swank was talking about, the letter states that in July of 2022, the Athens County Humane Society took on this responsibility. So they're probably now getting their ducks in order and figuring out what the Ohio Revised Code says and how they can pay for this. Obviously, the Humane Society's mission is to prevent cruelty and neglect, and they're trying to do that in the city and the county. Whether there is a big problem, I can't answer that question. But this is their mission, and they're looking for a way to do that. Other questions from the committee? Other members of council? Member Swank?
How many villages are there in the county?
I believe there's 8, don't hold me to that, but it's 8 or 9 villages.
Okay.
There's only 2 cities in the county.
And 2 cities and 150. So what we're talking about, if everybody pays their minimum amount, this is only going to raise $7,200 a year. That's it. And if you look down here, there says we operate off of donations, fundraisers, and grants. I mean, this is a piddly little amount that we're giving to help these people out for a real need. Yeah, it's only $6,000 or $7,200 a year for everybody.
Oh, for everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
For the city, it's 1,500.
Yeah, yeah.
Other questions from council members? Comments? Members of the public? Okay, thank you. We'll come forward next week with a ordinance to recommend this. Thank you. Okay, the next items on our agenda are appropriations. We have two appropriations, one in the amount of $3,640. This is the NOPEC grant we were discussing a little bit earlier under the subject of NOPEC. And I believe this is for solar lighting on Meadow Lane. I want to ask the mayor right away. It was listed in the information as sort of pathway lighting, but I'm assuming this is very similar to what we've seen on the Far East Side. The last time we used this grant, is that on Grandview? No, Mayor?
No.
Okay.
The lighting that we have over on several streets, Townsend, Councilmember Swank, you know the one,
Townsend, Eden, Grand
Grand Park.
and Avon.
and Avon. No, those are different. Those are freestanding street lamps, so they're commercial grade street lamps that are there that light the mid blocks because of the grid runs east-west, not
Right.
north-south. No, these are pathway lights. I guess the best example to give you, although they will look nothing like them, are the pathway lights that you see in front of the community center by the Rotary Fountain, and the community center in general. It'll be like that, to where, working with the Athens County Realtors Association, received a grant to do a parklet, if you will, a small park in our parcel. We have 1/3 of an acre, or 0.3 acres, at Meadow Lane. Unfortunately, so we still will put this in the future, and likely through another grant that Miranda Cheshire, who is the president or affiliated with the Athens County Realtors Association, that they will continue to get grants as soon as we get one small glitch out of the way. That being a significant failure of a storm tunnel that runs underneath that property. For anyone who's driven down Meadow Lane may have noticed that we have basically a 5-foot culvert pipe that is sitting there. When we started exploring putting a parklet in, which is what this lighting is for, solar lighting, that we noticed a interesting depression on the ground itself, and in having our crews get in and run the critter cam through that storm tunnel that we knew was there, is when we identified that the walls of the brick walls, mind you, of a significant storm tunnel underneath that property and adjoining properties is failing. It's failed. And so we've got some work to do. Unfortunately, the timing of this park and the current grant that Miranda Cheshire has gotten is going to expire at the end of October, or the beginning of October, so we've got to pivot really quickly and do some other thing with that $5,000, possibly the Armory Park or something, but we'll figure out for her where this could go. But I'm not giving up on this concept of having a small community area that people can enjoy, so that we're still going to move forward to lighting, to where we will put lighting in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Long answer to your
That's all
short
right.
question.
I appreciate it now that I understand what this is about. Questions from the committee on this, using the NOPEC grant for this solar pathway lighting? Other members of council? Members of the public? Okay, thank you. The second appropriation item is a $20,000 appropriation for a payment to the LEAX Water District. This is, as I understand it, part of the Kershaw Green Agreement, and it's about sort of trading customers, or not trading, but in this case, we're just purchasing. Director Stone, can you help me out here?
This body passed approval of an agreement with LEAX, between the city and LEAX, in order for that development to be brought in the city. You know, current law says if you want to annex, you got to have city sewer, and if you want city sewer, you got to have city water. And if you are in a rural water district area and you annex to the city, state law says that the rural water district has a right to serve water unless the city buys the customers from the rural water district, and it has to do with the federal debt that rural water districts and their ability to pay it back get. So, so anytime we annex into one of the surrounding rural water districts, we have to negotiate with LEAX to basically get those customers. We did that. Council passed an agreement, that approval of an agreement between the city and LEAX, where for 15 years, the city would collect water bills charged at the LEAX rate rather than at the city rate. So, and then after those 15 years, those customers revert to the city rate. And then we would pay 1/2 of the revenue to LEAX, and the city would keep 1/2 of the revenue. There's no appropriation in the water admin fund to do this. You know, it's just not something we typically do because we don't pay that to other utilities for this, and this just places money to be able to do that for the end of the year now that they're starting to have residents come online. Interestingly, and it kind of makes me a little proud and also a little sad, we did the math. The city will actually make more money charging the LEAX rate and just keeping half of it than if we were charging city rates for those 15 years. So my point is, LEAX charges more than twice as much as the city does for water. And you know, maybe that tells us something about what we should charge for water, but we also are proud that we keep our rates relatively low to our customers. So, that was a longer answer probably than the mayor wanted me to give. So.
Thank you, Director Stone. Questions from the committee? Other members of council, Member Swank.
Director Stone, in fiscal year 24 and 25, do you anticipate having to buy any more customers?
Yes, I do, specifically on Dairy Lane. Those are the ones, and they'll be coming to you sooner than fiscal year 24 on that, probably a little bit later this fall once we kind of hash it out. There are 7 customers on Dairy Lane that already are LEAX customers, and with the new water line that's going in to provide fire protection to the dairy barn, we think it's time to jump all those customers over to the city. That was an area where the city did annex, and LEAX kept their customers, but you know, for all intents and purposes, they've been in the city a very long time, and really they need to jump over to city. But LEAX has the right to serve, and so we have to buy them out. And so I've been working with the general manager at LEAX for a proposal on what that cost would be, and I'll come to you soon and seek an appropriation to buy those customers.
So you don't have a guesstimate as to what that may be relative to the 20,000 we're talking about today?
I mean, it's apples and oranges. This is to pay LEAX for under that agreement for 15 years. The one on Dairy Lane is going to be much more, probably an order of magnitude more, but it's all at once. We just buy them, and then we collect, you know, water payments at the city rate for that.
Mayor, did you have something to add?
Just to again add on top of that, the 20,000, you know, the customers that we're seeing right now that are actually have moved into Kershaw Green, it's small in number, and so, but we still have this commitment with LEAX versus Dairy Lane. Those are existing customers, so they're already on, and you know, it's not going to necessarily be the same transitional issue.
And as we see development down Dairy Lane with the new community authority, those will all be Athens customers.
Yes, they will. They will. Or any future annexation, you know, when you look at the strategic plan and the growth pattern that the city should grow in, you know, the direction, you know, we could see this with other customers in the future, or areas where there's no development yet, and really no service, active service there, which would be very similar to Kershaw Green in the future. But your point's well taken that we likely will see the city continue to grow out that corridor.
Great, thank you. Any comments from the public on this appropriation? That ends Finance and Personnel. President Eisner.
Thank you, Councilmember Crowell. And with that, we'll end our